If I could do it, anybody could do it.
How do you go about dealing with setbacks in business?
A lot of extremely intelligent people make that mistake.
So would you say that EQ is more important than IQ in business? Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I've got one of my all-time favorite people in the studio with me, my father, Christo Wiese, who is also known as one of the country's most legendary and iconic business people. Today I want to take this opportunity to share some of his top business lessons that he's learned over the years with all of you at home. So I hope you enjoy. Dad, what is the very first business lesson that comes to mind when you think of what you've learned?
Well, I think you'll find that most people who are perceived to have been successful in business, if you ask them, what's the secret or how did you manage to do it? A very common response will be, if I could do it, anybody could do it. So the lesson is that it is within the ability of most people to make a successful business career. You've got to understand that there is no magic to people who become successful business people.
What then does it take if there is no magic and if anyone can do it?
Well, the first thing I believe is that as one should develop a philosophical framework for one's life, a business should be built on a philosophy. In the case of Pep, we had a very simple philosophy that was articulated in 5 terms: faith, positive thinking, enthusiasm, hard work, and compassion. Those are the guideposts to make your business work. If you stick to those rules, then to come back to my opening comment, anybody can make it.
What is the second lesson in business that you have learned?
That business, a business career, like life itself, has its ups and downs. And you will be measured not only by the heights you achieve, but how you deal with setbacks.
How do you go about dealing with setbacks in business?
You've got to accept when the downs come, and you've got to, more than anything else, stop and count your blessings. Don't roll over and die. I've had friends who were very wealthy and who lost all or most of their money, and I could watch how they reacted, those who kind of gave up and started depending on other people, and those who refused to lie down and started over again and made another success. At the end of the day, you have to continue to believe in yourself, and you have to count your blessings.
Dad, we recently celebrated your milestone 80th birthday.
Yeah.
And in the video tribute that I created for you, your friends couldn't stop praising you for how you remember everyone's names and how you always show an interest in everyone from the gardener to the CEOs. What part of your success do you attribute to your interpersonal skills?
I feel very complimented that people think I have those skills. I believe it's absolutely essential. The way you interact with people, not to just see them as, flitting images, but as human beings that have the same fears and same aspirations to an extent, and treat them with respect and dignity.
Why is it so essential?
Well, because you need to work with people. One of my approaches has always been that I have tried throughout my life not to make enemies. I discovered over the years that I do have enemies, people that hate my guts, some of whom I'd never even met for whatever reason, but I've always tried not to make enemies, because you never know where your path crosses another person's and how the roles may have changed. So there's no point in burning bridges.
How do you go about making big, complex decisions where the future is uncertain and there are no guarantees in business?
Well, in life there are no guarantees, none whatsoever. That is the beauty of life. But I think the secret to making what people consider to be complex decisions is to understand that nothing is that complicated at the end of the day. You apply your mind, you cut to the chase, try to be very logical in your approach, and then things are really not as complicated as they may seem to somebody looking from the outside.
And what is your philosophy about making decisions in the first place? Because you've often taught that to us as a lesson, that it's better to make a decision than to worry about making the wrong decision and fail to make a decision. So if you could just elucidate that.
I mean, you've put the words out there. The thing about making decisions is make a decision. Because by not making a decision, you are also making a decision, but in the wrong direction. Rather run the risk of making the wrong decision than not taking decisions when it's required. You must just always accept that things can change, because there are so many things over which you have no control. I often told people that to become an entrepreneur or a business person, you have to be a little bit crazy, because if you get out of bed in the morning and think about all the things that can go wrong that day, over which you have absolutely no control, then, you know, a totally sane person would get back into bed, because you are at risk.
What is the lesson to be learned, or the mistake to avoid, when it comes to attaining wealth and maintaining wealth? Because those are two very separate things.
Yeah, it's much easier to make money than to keep it. Keeping is another exercise altogether. Now, I think what happens to people is they become blasé about it. They just think, well, I've got so much money, you know, and everything always goes my way, and then something happens and catastrophe follows.
So what is the lesson or the golden rule?
Remain ever vigilant, and don't get too impressed with your own perceived success. Don't start believing your own fairy tale.
Which one quality do you think, or a weakness that someone might possess, they really need to combat or overcome before truly being able to achieve great success?
The one that I would say is certainly, to my way of thinking, uppermost, is when people do not have a positive attitude. They don't think positively. It's always the glass is half empty instead of half full. That is a killer.
Why?
Well, because what is the benefit of thinking about all the things that can go wrong, and, you know, just how difficult it is, and that you can't do it? What do you gain by it?
And what's the point in being positive for you?
Well, because positive thinking makes you achieve things that you otherwise wouldn't be able to achieve. If you focus on all the things that can go wrong, as I said earlier on, you'll never get out of bed, because that's the safest place to be.
And if you focus on everything that can go right?
That energizes you, and you start going after the things that you want.
What misconception do people have about people that are perceived to be very wealthy when it comes to that which it took to get them there? What misconception do people have?
They think those people had some kind of blueprint. They had some kind of plan, everything mapped out exactly. That is not how business works. Business, at the end of the day, is opportunistic. You have some kind of plan, you start off, and different opportunities cross your path, and you assess them and decide how you want to exploit them.
Great.
There's no blueprint.
What would you say is the single biggest mistake that small businesses or startups make that cause them to never take off?
Well, the first point I want to make is that all so-called big businesses, all of them, no matter what their business is, have one thing in common. And that one thing is they all started as small businesses.
So what is the main reason that small startup businesses often fail within the first 3 years?
Lack of passion, which means sacrifice, work in the sense that people normally understand it, and impatience. Suddenly you've now got to have a bigger house and a fancier car, and you've got to have your holidays not in Mossel Bay but in Saint-Tropez. That's a killer.
Why?
Well, I mean, first of all, you will find that the money doesn't last, and secondly, your passion for your business clearly will be impacted by running after these things, which don't necessarily contribute to the success of your business.
You obviously have many strengths, which you are very known for, respected for. What would you say has been or is your biggest weakness in business, and how do you combat that?
There are too many to mention. I wouldn't select one.
If you had to mention a few, people would really love to know, what are your weaknesses?
I have all the weaknesses that everybody else
Like what, Papa?
suffers from.
Like what?
You get tired, you procrastinate.
So Dad, how do you deal with the weakness of procrastination?
I try to surround myself with people who will constantly irritate me about my procrastination. I love the action of doing deals and putting them together. I'm not a good crossing the T's and dotting the I's man. So I try to surround myself with people who are good at that. So that's how you would combat it. I mean, therefore, you are never a lone ranger. I mean, nobody will achieve success in business unless he has people around him that support and make sure that things are tied down properly and done properly.
And fills the gaps.
It fills the gaps.
Dad, what role does timing or being in the right place at the right time play in business success?
Enormous. You know, people who deny the contribution of luck in a business career are simply lying to themselves. It is so that you need that break, but the truth is, if you're not in the game and you're not playing the game, then you won't get to those opportunities, or they won't cross your path. You are out there so that the opportunity can hit you.
Tell me the story about you walking across the road and the man who said you would have walked across another road.
I once told a colleague that, you know, how it happened that my family and myself got involved in PEP. It was because it was during a university holiday, and I walked from my dad's garage across the road to another man's garage, a friend, and he told me about what Renier van Rooyen was doing with PEP. At that stage, he had 3 or 4 shops, which in Uppington terms was a lot. And I went home and spoke to my dad and said, well, maybe we should join Renier. And, you know, the rest is history. And I said to this colleague, you know, I wonder how my life would have turned out had I not on that particular day walked across that street. And his reply was, well, you're one of those people who would have walked across another street. We knew Renier van Rooyen. He was married to a cousin of mine, and we took note of what he was doing, but not really interested until I had that discussion.
So what is the lesson then about your having crossed the street?
If you're not interested in what is happening in the world, how will you ever find an opportunity? If you just live in your little closed world and you don't talk to people, or you don't read or watch TV, how will you know what's happening out there? And regrettably, there are a lot of people who are simply not interested. They focused on their own little problems and their own little world every second of every minute.
Dad, there are many people who have big dreams and aspirations but feel that they are not born into opportunity. What is your advice to them?
You must never allow other people to dictate to you where your horizon is. People will try to make you believe that because you grew up poor, or because you were uneducated, or because you had the wrong religion or the wrong skin color, you can't make it. In society, that message comes across so strongly that people who are in that unfortunate position will say to themselves, well, you know, I happen to be born
On the back foot.
on the back foot, so I'm not going to make it. Never allow that. If other people can do it, you can do it. That's the first important lesson. The story that my dad told me was about this man who worked for a church in a small English village. He was what we call in Afrikaans the koster. He's like a caretaker. But he couldn't read or write. He was very happy in his job. He was happy in the little town where he lived. And then one day the church council came and said that henceforth they require him also to keep the books and collect the donations from the congregation. And he said, but he can't do that because he can't read or write. And they said, well, then you've got no job. And he had to pack up and he moved to London. And he started on the street corner selling apples. He bought apples at the market and sold the apples. And gradually he started making money, and then he had a little shop, and then he had 2 shops, and eventually he became one of the richest men in England. Then a newspaper reporter came to him to do an interview. The journalist said, you know, it's an amazing story, because look what you have achieved in spite of the fact that you came from the wrong side of the tracks and had no education. Can you imagine what your life would have been like if you were an educated person? And the man looked at the journalist and he said, you know, if I were an educated person, I would still be working for that church. But because I couldn't read or write, I was forced to take another route. And I became this hugely successful person.
So what is the lesson?
The lesson is the point that I tried to make earlier on. You determine your own fate. Do not let other people tell you because you are Afrikaans speaking, you can't be a success. Or because you're black, you are doomed never to be a successful person. It's nonsense.
What are the basic lessons that every child, whether they go into business or not, should understand about how to work with money?
I've often told you kids how you must look at money. If you've got money, you must see it as there's a little dam, and the money is the water in the dam, in the pool. And into that pool, you've got one pipe flowing in, and you've got another pipe flowing out. If the pipe that flows out is bigger than the pipe that flows in, sooner or later, the dam will be dry. So what is the lesson? First of all, you must limit the outflow as much as you can, and you must work like clappers to make sure that the pipe that comes into the dam flows as strongly as it can. That's the basic lesson. Once you understand that, you understand everything. You will know my hang-up about having a budget. That is what it means. You have so much income, so you can only spend so much. Otherwise, the dam will get dry. The money will run out. It's a simple mathematical fact.
What is the lesson to be learned or the thing to understand about compound interest?
The late Donnie Gordon, who was one of South Africa's most successful businessmen, always made the comment that compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. Because if you take money, let's say you start with 100 and you invest it at say 10% return, then after 7 years, you will have 200. That's compound interest. And after another 7 years, you'll have 400. So it is the eighth wonder of the world. And when you have money or investments, you have the benefit of compound interest. When you have a lot of debt, on the other hand, it works the other way. You start off owing 100 and you don't service your loan, then 7 years from now you will owe 200.
So what is the lesson about debt? You don't have it.
No, debt is not necessarily evil, but you certainly have to apply it correctly. I read Warren Buffett's book, and Warren Buffett is hailed as an absolute genius. And when I read the book, I thought, but there is the secret to his success. Whenever he bought something, let's say for 1,500, he would never have more than 500 debt against the 1,500 asset. Never more than 1/3. Now, some people will never have more than 1/4, but you must be sure that you've got enough protection, buffer against your debt. Because the world changes.
Currency fluctuations.
Currency fluctuations, interest rates,
Wars.
politics, war, pandemics.
Dad, I remember when I was a little girl, you gave a TV interview, and one of the things that I really recall is you're saying a great leader gets ordinary people to do extraordinary things.
Right. That is what a leader does. He inspires ordinary people to do extraordinary things. You take a business like PEP, where Renier van Rooyen, who didn't have a university education because his dad died when he was in first year at university. He had to go and find a job and then start a little business. And I knew all the people who worked in PEP stores in those days. They were ordinary people, but through the leadership of a man like Renier van Rooyen, he made them do extraordinary things.
How?
Well, I mean, by having a clear plan, by working as hard as everybody else did, and by teaching them this philosophy of faith, positive thinking, hard working, etc., etc. Just said, that's the way to do it.
What do you think makes you both an effective leader and a popular one?
I just believe that it is a better way of being a leader by hopefully getting people to like you.
And how do you think you've managed to do that over the years? Because you are very loved by your colleagues.
It's nice to hear. I hope it's true, but I suppose it's just because I genuinely like people. I really like people. I try to treat them with respect and dignity, and humor plays a big role. You make people relax by making them laugh, and if you can, by poking fun at yourself. Never take yourself too seriously, because you are but a speck in the universe. You come and go. I think that's another thing. It's not to become arrogant and make people feel less than what they are. I have difficulty with people who are extremely intelligent, and I always have to issue the warning, because a lot of extremely intelligent people make that mistake. They make other people feel stupid. And
to their own detriment.
Yeah, to their own detriment. If you know you're more intelligent than the next guy, don't ram it down his throat, because you know the difference between genius and ordinary intelligence is not great.
And if you lose friends in the process, your intelligence is not going to get you anywhere.
No, it's not going to get you anywhere.
So would you say that EQ is more important than IQ in business?
Yeah, I would say yes. If it's a binary choice,
If it is.
then I would say, yeah, EQ is more important than IQ. Because I've seen some people who are really not very bright, but achieve great things in business.
What do you think is the single most important characteristic that you were born with that has brought you to where you are today?
Oh, for me, it's easy to answer. Incurable optimism. Incurable optimism.
Have you always been that way?
Always.
Is it a choice? Is it a discipline? Or does it come naturally?
I suppose you're born that way. Or you grow up that way. That's the whole thing of positive thinking. Glass half full, glass half empty. It's just how you see life.